Today we're going to talk about how to understand and use reference faces in timber framing. In order to understand how to properly lay out and cut joints using the square rule method of timber framing, you have to understand where the reference face of the timber is and how we use it to align our joints. Either I missed it or I wasn't told to me when I took my first timber framing courses, or I didn't absorb it when I read all the books I've got on timber framing. But understanding the locations of the reference faces of timbers in a frame is an important aspect to timber framing. There are general locations that every structure has to have, which may be considered common sense, but I feel that sometimes these common sense things have to be said so the new person knows what we consider to be common sense. And there are frame-specific locations that have to be explored and understood so that the joint can be laid out and cut correctly. When these are done correctly, then the frame assembly is smooth and everything lines up nicely. This video will show you how to use reference faces in timber framing. To start, at the beginning, we're going to look at a gable end of a drawing of a frame. I'll use this frame that I designed as an example, as these drawings will show us the basic reference faces and planes. So that we're all on the same page, a face is the actual side of a timber and a plane is a line in space. We'll show how a plane is also used later when we get to those frame-specific locations. Here we see another outline of the building, and to make all the flooring sit flat on the floor joists and sills, the joints have to be cut so the top surfaces of them are all flush. So the top of the floor joists and sills are a reference face. In this gable end drawing, there is a red dotted line to show you the reference plane of the top of the sills and the floor joists down here at the bottom. This shed will have a loft with a deck. The top of the tie beams will hold up the deck. So the top of the tie beams have to be level with each other, and they are at the same elevation so the loft floor is flat and true. The top of all tie beams are also a reference face and or plane. These reference faces are shown with a thick red horizontal dotted line in this drawing. Next, we have to have our shed enclosed. This shed will be enclosed with vertical board and batten siding. In order to do that, all joints of the timbers have to be smooth to the outside of the building so that all the siding will nail on flat and true. The external surfaces of all timbers are the reference face. This end view, we can now see the red vertical lines showing the reference planes and edges, and on a side view we see the red lines on the gable ends. When you have two timbers join each other, they have to be flush like this. Here we see the tie beam meeting the posts, the surface flush to each other, not like this. These siding will not sit flat against the tie beam and the posts as the surfaces are not flush and flat to each other. The next reference faces are the top of the rafters so that all the roof decking materials can lay flat on top of the rafters. The reference face are the top of the rafters shown here with a red dotted line. These are the basic common sense reference faces. Labeling your timbers. In order to keep track of which face of the timber is a reference face, we label our timbers. The surfaces are labeled with a triangle, usually drawn with a pencil or a lumber crayon. Some timber framers like to use white chalk. That's okay too. We like to use a lumber crayon, and we use them to draw a triangle, and then we fill in the triangle on the reference face that is the primary surface as shown here and here. In this 3D drawing, you'll see the red triangles on the timbers after the joints have been cut and the frame has been assembled. As you can see, the larger timbers in this picture are the sills of the frame. The smaller timbers are the floor joists going between the long sills. The sill on the end of the frame, which is the gable end, goes between the two long sills, is called a cross sill. The cross sill is labeled with the top being the reference face, and the adjacent face out here points to the reference edge. These are easy to understand as these adjacent faces are the outside of the building, and as the siding has to lay flat against the outside of the building, these are the secondary reference faces, again known as adjacent faces. Now we look at the floor joists again. They also have adjacent face labels. Usually the timber frame designer establishes some rules that all joints and or timbers have to follow in order to have everything line up. End of part 1.